My name is Alicia Chown, and I'm 31 years old. If you had walked into that baby shower without context, you would have thought it was just another picture-perfect celebration. An overpriced event space downtown, fake ivy climbing the walls, soft lighting designed to make every photo look curated and warm. Everything about it screamed performance. My sister stood at the center of it all, glowing, surrounded by friends who spoke about her pregnancy journey like it was a heroic quest. I stayed toward the back of the room with my 10-year-old son, letting him play games on my phone while I tried to disappear into the background. He was wearing basketball shorts and a Minecraft t-shirt, which I noticed earned him a brief look from my sister the moment we walked in. The kind of look that doesn't say anything out loud, but still manages to judge. I ignored it. I always do. My gift was practical: diapers and a gift card. Nothing flashy, nothing Instagram-worthy. I noticed she didn't open it during the gift portion. That didn't surprise me either. Everything stayed pleasant until she stood up to give her thank you speech. She tapped her glass, smiling sweetly, her husband standing behind her with that practiced, supportive grin. Then she said it. To the people who always support, she paused just long enough to let the room lean in, even if they're not cut out to be real parents themselves. The pause that followed was sharp and deliberate. I heard my mom snort. A few of my sister's friends laughed, that polite laughter people use when they don't want to be the odd one out. My dad didn't look up from his plate. My sister lifted her glass and took a sip like she'd just said something clever. I didn't need to ask who it was aimed at. I felt it before I fully understood it. For a split second, I considered letting it go, being the bigger person. My son looked up at me then, confused, sensing the shift in the room. Something inside me snapped quietly and completely. I raised my water bottle and said, calm enough to shock myself, to support, and to the lease that I just broke. Her smile vanished instantly. The room went silent. Her husband's hand dropped from her back. My mom blinked, like she'd misheard me. My dad stopped chewing. I took a slow sip and nodded. Yeah, guess you'll need a new sponsor. I turned to my son and told him to grab his stuff. No one moved. No one spoke. We walked out without saying goodbye. In the car, my son asked if she was mad. I told him she'd be fine. Then he asked if I was mad. I said no. I said I just decided not to keep paying for people who mock me in front of a room full of guests. What no one at that party knew was that I had already planned to stop paying her rent. The timing just happened to be perfect. The truth was, that toast didn't change my decision. It just revealed it out loud. 4 months before that baby shower, I had already started preparing myself to stop covering my sister's rent. $1,500 a month. Every month. $6,000 total by the time I finally pulled the plug. I paid it quietly, without announcing it, even when it meant cutting back on things I'd promised my son, even when it meant saying no to a short weekend trip he'd been excited about. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was for the kids. I told myself family helps family. What I didn't tell myself was how normalized it had become. No thank yous, no check-ins, no questions about whether I could afford it. It was just expected, the way things always are when you become the reliable one. I was the backup plan, the safety net, the person everyone remembered only when something went wrong. My sister never asked how I was managing. She just sent links to nursery furniture she liked, posted photos of matching outfits for her toddler, and complained about how stressful everything was, as if money appeared out of thin air when she needed it. The morning after the baby shower, my phone buzzed while I was making pancakes. First, a text from my mom. Can you talk? We need to clear the air before things get worse. I didn't respond. 10 minutes later, the call came through. I knew it was a trap before I answered, but part of me still wanted to believe they might finally listen. My mom's voice came first, followed immediately by my sister's, sharp and angry. She didn't wait for pleasantries. So you're just going to humiliate me in front of all my friends and then disappear? I let the silence stretch until she said my name 3 times. Then I said it clearly. No more rent. You crossed a line and I'm done. She spiraled the way she always does. It was a joke. You're overreacting. You ruined a happy moment. My mom jumped in, reframing it as a misunderstanding, throwing out the familiar line about not letting one comment destroy a family. One comment. That comment was just the first time she'd said the quiet part out loud in front of witnesses. You called me a fake parent, I said. You don't get to say that and still expect my money. She went quiet for a moment, then tried a different angle. The baby, the toddler, stability. She said it was cruel to pull support now, that I was abandoning her at her most vulnerable. I could hear my mom in the background whispering that I was being harsh, that maybe I could help just a little longer, maybe $500 a month, just until they found something more permanent. I told them I had already helped more than enough. 4 months, $6,000. I said I didn't owe them a fifth month, or 500, or even 50. Their financial problems weren't mine to solve, and a baby didn't erase what she'd said, especially when she meant it. That's when she got angry. She accused me of doing it to feel superior, of holding money over her head, of never really caring. My mom tried to cut her off, but it was too late. The truth slipped out, raw and ugly, and I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was finally honest. I told her if she wanted to keep that apartment, she could figure it out with her husband. Maybe sell one of the designer diaper bags she loved posting about. Maybe Mom and Dad could finally step in. I said my piece and hung up. The next day, my dad called. He didn't yell. He just asked if I was really going to leave my sister stranded with a baby on the way. I asked him if he thought I was a real parent. He didn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. By the end of the week, I had missed calls from both parents, a long voicemail from my sister that started calm and ended with her screaming at someone in the background, and a text from an unknown number that simply said, "You're really doing this to her?" I didn't reply. I wanted them to sit with the quiet for once. Normally I would have caved, sent a "let's talk" message, tried to smooth it over. This time I didn't. I kept living my life. Work, picking up my son, making dinner, and every night another message would pop up, just enough to stir guilt. My mom sent photos of my sister's toddler playing in the apartment with captions about not understanding what was happening. Then messages about stress being bad for the baby. Then the warning. "You'll regret this someday." My dad tried neutrality, which is just taking her side with softer words. He kept asking if I was absolutely sure, reminded me the baby could arrive any week, said uprooting them now felt cold. I asked if he thought what she said at the shower was okay. He didn't answer that either. Then the Venmo request came, $265.34. "Your share for the stroller." I laughed out loud. 2 weeks of silence, no apology, no accountability, and she still saw me as her personal bank. I declined it and sent it back with one message. "Put this toward your next punchline." That's when I knew this wasn't about money anymore. It was about entitlement. And entitlement doesn't stop asking just because you say no once. The Venmo request wasn't a mistake. It was a test. When I declined it, what followed felt less like a family disagreement and more like a coordinated response. My sister didn't text me directly at first. Instead, the messages started coming from everywhere else, like she was outsourcing the guilt. A cousin I barely speak to sent a long paragraph about compassion. An aunt reminded me that pregnancy hormones make people say things they don't mean. A family friend told me she hoped I'd find it in my heart to forgive, as if forgiveness was a switch I was refusing to flip out of spite. That's when I realized my sister wasn't trying to apologize, she was trying to manage the story. She started posting vague things on social media, nothing that named me, nothing that could be directly challenged. Quotes about how money can't buy love. Posts about people who use financial help as a way to control others. Captions about strength, resilience, and being judged unfairly during your most vulnerable moments. The comments were split. Some people praised her. Others asked questions she didn't answer. Screenshots started circulating quietly. I didn't engage. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. Silence was the only thing she couldn't twist easily. Then came the parties. About a week after the shower, she hosted a birthday party for her husband. Big backyard setup, decorations, food truck, music, the whole thing. I didn't know about it until I saw photos on Facebook. Everyone was there. My parents, relatives who live hours away, kids running around with gift bags and balloons. Everyone except me and my son. No invite, no heads up, just exclusion, delivered casually and publicly. What hurt wasn't missing the party. It was seeing the kids' table in the corner, little chairs, party favors, 4 children sitting there laughing. My son wasn't one of them. He's 10. He's their nephew. And no one even thought to text me. That wasn't an oversight. That was a message. I closed the app and didn't tell my son. What would I say? That we weren't invited because I stopped paying someone else's bills. That family was conditional, and his place in it depended on my usefulness. Later that night, I got a message from one of my sister's friends, someone I'd met once at a barbecue years ago. It just said, "Honestly, good for you. She's gotten used to stepping on people and smiling while she does it. Hope you and your kid are okay." I saved it, not to show anyone, just to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. My mom called a few days later, alone this time. No speakerphone, no sister waiting to jump in. She talked about how much pressure the family was under, how she was just trying to keep everyone together. I let her talk until she finally said it. "What if you don't pay the full rent? Just $500 a month. Just enough so they don't have to move. It wouldn't be forever." I asked her why I should pay anything at all. She said because I was in a better position. Because she's your sister. That was it. That was the argument. I told her being in a better position wasn't a lifetime sentence. It didn't make me the family's financial plan. And being her sister didn't mean I had to accept being insulted publicly and then expected to quietly fund her life. I told her I'd done enough, and that this family needed to stop mistaking my silence for permission. My mom went quiet. Then she said, "Okay," and hung up. I thought that might finally be it, that maybe they'd accept the boundary. But with my sister, nothing ends without one last attempt to regain control. A few days later, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a printed photo from that birthday party. Everyone smiling. My parents front and center, my sister holding her toddler. On the back, written in thick black marker, were 6 words. "You didn't have to make it this way." I stared at it for a full minute, then dropped it straight into the trash. That night, my dad texted me. "She says she'll apologize. Will you help again if she does?" I didn't answer. I already knew what that apology would sound like. Soft words, no ownership, a reset button pressed for convenience. 3 days later, it came. "I'm sorry if what I said at the shower upset you. Sorry if, not sorry for, not. I was wrong. Not I disrespected your husband. Just enough to sound reasonable without admitting anything." When I didn't reply, she followed it up with, "I don't want to fight anymore. Can we just move past it? The baby's almost here." There it was, the cycle, perfectly intact. I archived the thread and didn't respond. That same day, I found out my parents had stepped in to help her financially. They couldn't afford the full amount, so they were splitting it with someone else. Maybe her in-laws, maybe a loan. It didn't matter. They'd done what they always do. Make it work for her. When I needed help years ago after my divorce, I'd gotten lectures about budgeting and responsibility. The contrast was sharp enough to finally feel clean. That was when I stopped feeling guilty. Because this wasn't about one toast or one payment. It was about roles. And for the first time in my life, I was stepping out of mine. 2 months passed with no direct contact, and that quiet felt heavier than the arguments ever had. I started to believe maybe we'd reach some kind of uneasy truce, an unspoken agreement to stay out of each other's lives. My days settled into a rhythm again. Work, school pickups, dinners that didn't end in anxiety. I even let myself breathe a little, like maybe I'd finally stepped off the edge of something. Then the knock came. It was just after midnight, the kind of hour where nothing good shows up at your door. I opened it to find my sister standing there with her 2 kids, eyes red, hair pulled back in a rush, bags on the ground beside her. She didn't say hello. She didn't apologize. She went straight to the point. She couldn't pay the rent. Her landlord had given her warnings. Now she was out. She had nowhere else to go. For a moment, I just stood there. I looked at the kids, tired and confused, clinging to her legs, and my chest tightened. That instinct to fix things surged up immediately, the reflex that had defined my role in this family for as long as I could remember. But then I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw that nothing had changed. No shame, no accountability, just expectation. I told her she needed to go to a motel or to our parents. Her face hardened instantly. She said it was my responsibility to help her, that I was her sister. That family doesn't turn its back like this. She said she just needed a few months, enough time to save and get back on her feet. I told her calmly that I couldn't do that she'd burned this bridge herself, that she hadn't apologized, hadn't taken responsibility, hadn't shown any respect for the man she'd insulted or the family she expected to rescue her. She called me cruel. She accused me of choosing my husband over my own blood. I told her yes, without hesitation. I chose the person who had stood by me, who raised my child with me, who never mocked or diminished me. I told her I wasn't doing this in front of her kids, and then I closed the door. She stood outside shouting for a while, calling my name, calling me heartless, saying I'd regret it. I didn't open it again. Eventually, she left and went to our parents' house instead. I barely slept that night, not because I doubted my decision, but because it hurt knowing how deeply broken things had become. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought rock bottom might force some kind of reflection. I was wrong. A few weeks later, while I was at work, my husband called me in a voice I'd never heard before. My sister had shown up at our house again, unannounced, drunk. She was banging on the door, screaming his name. When he opened it, she shoved her way inside, slurring accusations, blaming him for everything. She called him weak. She called him pathetic. She said he'd turned me against my family. He tried to calm her down, told her to sit, to breathe, to leave. That's when she started throwing things. A lamp crashed to the floor. Glass shattered. Then she turned her anger toward our daughter, yelling at her to get out of the way. That was the moment my husband stopped trying to reason. He called the police. By the time officers arrived, she was still shouting, still trying to paint herself as the victim. The security cameras told a different story. They took her away for trespassing. She spent the night in jail. When I got home and heard what happened, something in me went cold. Any sympathy I'd been holding on to disappeared the second I learned she'd terrified my child. There are boundaries you don't cross. She crossed all of them. That night, my husband and I talked until the sun came up. We agreed there would be no more chances. If she ever came back, we'd pursue a restraining order without hesitation. Protecting our family wasn't optional anymore. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the worst of it yet. The arrest didn't shock the family as much as it should have. It stunned them, yes, but it didn't immediately change the story they'd been telling themselves. By the next morning, my phone was already filling up with messages framed as concern. My mom asked if I was okay, but quickly pivoted to whether my sister was all right. My dad wanted to know exactly what happened, then asked if maybe things had been blown out of proportion. That question alone told me everything. Even with police involved, even with footage, even with my child shaken, there was still a reflex to soften what my sister had done. My husband filed a report and gave the officers access to the security footage. He was calm through the whole process, but I could see the toll it took on him afterward. He double-checked the locks. He walked our daughter to her room and sat with her longer than usual, telling her she was safe, that nothing bad would happen. Watching him do that made my chest ache. This was the man my sister called weak. This was the man she said wasn't a real parent, and he was the one holding our family together when everything else tried to tear it apart. The family reaction fractured further over the next few days. Some relatives finally said what they'd been thinking quietly for years, that my sister had gone too far, that her behavior wasn't normal, that the drinking had been obvious. Others took a softer approach, saying she was under pressure, that being pregnant made everything harder, that she needed grace. I noticed how no one suggested grace for my husband, or for my child, or for me. Grace was always reserved for the person causing the damage. My parents argued about what to do next. My dad wanted my sister out of their house immediately. He said she was spiraling and that the kids weren't safe around her in that state. My mom resisted at first, torn between fear and guilt, but then admitted something she'd been avoiding. She'd noticed my sister drinking more heavily. She'd come home late, slurring her words, sometimes while the kids were still awake. My mom said she kept telling herself it was stress, that it would pass. After the arrest, she couldn't deny it anymore. That night, my sister called me from an unknown number. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail anyway, her voice thick with anger and self-pity. She blamed me for everything, said I'd turned the family against her, said my husband had provoked her, said none of this would have happened if I'd just kept helping her like before. Listening to it, I felt something settle inside me with an unexpected calm. She wasn't apologizing. She was still rewriting reality to make herself the victim. There was nothing left to salvage. A week later, my parents told me they were setting conditions. My sister could stay temporarily, but only if she entered counseling, stopped drinking, and followed strict rules around the kids. My dad made it clear that if she broke those conditions, she was out. I didn't argue. I didn't weigh in. That wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had spent years trying to manage her life for her, and it had nearly cost me my own peace. My husband and I moved forward with the restraining order. Filing it felt heavy, like crossing a line you never imagined crossing with your own family, but it also felt necessary. When it was approved, I cried in the parking lot, not because I felt guilty, but because I finally felt protected. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been living until that tension lifted. Life didn't magically get better after that, but it got quieter. We repaired what had been broken in the house. We reestablished routines. My daughter went back to sleeping through the night. I stopped jumping every time the doorbell rang. My parents stopped asking when I'd forgive my sister and started asking how we were doing instead. It wasn't an apology, but it was a shift, and for now, that was enough. I still don't know what will happen to my sister. I don't know if she'll get help or hit another bottom. What I do know is that I can't be the one cushioning her fall anymore. Every time I did, she landed harder the next time. Stepping back wasn't cruelty. It was the only way left to protect the people who actually depended on me. I thought the restraining order would be the end of it. Not peace exactly, but distance. The kind of distance where you can finally stop bracing for impact every time your phone lights up or a car slows down outside your house. For a while, it worked. Weeks passed without a word from my sister. My parents kept communication light and careful, almost formal. It felt like everyone was learning a new shape to live in, one where pretending nothing happened was no longer an option. Then 6 months went by. Life filled the space she'd left behind. My son and I found a rhythm that felt like ours alone. Weekends turned into bike rides, movie nights, and small trips we never could afford back when I was paying someone else's rent. I started putting money aside into a savings account labeled "just because," something I'd never allowed myself to do before. For the first time in years, my future didn't feel like a list of obligations. It felt open. That's why the knock startled me so badly. It was a Tuesday night, cold and quiet. When I opened the door, my sister stood there alone. No kids, no husband, just her, arms crossed tightly like she was holding herself together. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of the confidence she used to wear like armor. I stepped aside without a word and let her come in. I didn't offer her a drink. I didn't sit down next to her. I waited. "I left him," she said finally, staring at the floor. She told me he'd taken out a credit card in her name and run it up. She said the baby was only a few months old and he was working nights, coming home drunk. She'd been staying with our parents, but it wasn't working. She needed a place to stay, just for a few nights, just until she figured things out. There it was, the same ask wrapped in a new story. 6 months ago, I would have folded. I would have told myself it was temporary, that it was for the kids, that family doesn't let family sleep on couches. This time, I felt nothing but a quiet certainty. I told her no, not angrily, not cruelly, just no. She looked stunned, like the word didn't compute. "You're really going to turn me away after everything," she said. I asked her one thing. "Do you remember what you said at your baby shower?" She looked away. I repeated it. "You said some people aren't cut out to be real parents. You meant me." She tried to brush it off, saying she didn't mean it like that. I told her I knew she meant it worse. She stood up, muttered something under her breath, and left. No shouting, no threats, just gone. The next morning, my mom texted me. One sentence. She told us you slammed the door in her face. I didn't respond. I hadn't slammed anything. I'd opened the door, listened, and finally chosen not to lose myself in someone else's chaos. That was the part they would never understand. To them, love meant endless sacrifice. To me, love meant safety, stability, and showing my child what self-respect looks like. I don't know where my sister will end up. I don't know if she'll ever take responsibility for the damage she caused, or if she'll keep telling the story where she's the victim and I'm the villain. What I do know is that I'm done being the one who carries everyone else while being treated like an afterthought. I didn't stop being family. I stopped being the fool.